What up, random rockers? Alright. It's been a while since I could say that instead of Schmodown rockers. I'm gonna get to that eventually, by the way, before sometime the end of the year. Speaking of that, year list probably won't start being released until the start of next year, I'm guessing, the way things are looking, so. Because I procrastinate a lot. So, anyways. Let's start playing some catch up now. And how we're going to do to start is, of course, with Declaration by Red. Well, this album's been, I've been a bit of a Red stan to it, up to a point. You know, I get some people who are like, you can find better bands that are technically symphonic metal, and maybe that's true, but do you really go to them for symphonic metal, or do you just really go to them because you want basically what would happen if there was a Chester Bennington fronted Evanescence, essentially? Or at least an attempt at it, and it kind of meant to appeal to more Christian-based fans to also want to have something that could almost slightly qualify as at the very least solid for what it is, no matter what they've done, despite moments where they change the formula or go in directions they're not supposed to. That just shouldn't, that don't work. Sometimes should, but don't. But in the case of Declaration, this one is kind of more back to form compared to the previous album, which I believe is called Gone or something. But either way, it had the dude that did. Producer was essentially the dude that created Starset, and if you didn't like Starset, which was all over that record, you're not gonna like that thing. But if you're annoyed with that, this is more closer return to form and maybe slightly attempting at kind of being borderline genty in places, or at least, but I wouldn't say it's their best, but it's far from their worst. I mean, we could do worse, and honestly, I'm running out of Christian bands here, guys. I mean, come on. So, just saying. Starting Over by Chris Stapleton. Yeah, you heard me right. You heard me right. Oh. The only artist that matters enough that I'm willing to go out of my way to buy the albums when it comes to country. It's been a while since I could actually say that. Aside from maybe some Red Dirt artists that's sort of shows up locally, close to a local bar sometimes. But yeah, of course, and plus he does know how to rock, so he sort of counts, I guess. And you know, it's country that doesn't suck. So, and once again, he just does it again. Would I say I like it better than my first exposure, which is essentially From a Room Volume 2? I mean, it was kind of came out late in the year, so I can't really say, but and I might be lenient towards some of y'all who are like, oh, this is whatever with it, but yeah, this is, yeah. It's fine. Just, it's still a great record. I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff that happened on this thing. I mean, the opening title track's fine. I mean, Watch You Burns, the whole Vegas shooting incident, and his thoughts on the situation, and what he wishes he could have done in the situation. Basically, almost like a side of a bullet situation, but, not, less shitty, I guess. And way more gospel to it, too, by the way. But, and plus you get that and a song about a big dog, especially following up a track like Hillbilly Blood. But anyways, plenty of good outlaw red dirt sort of stuff, while also kind of having these other more mainstreamy tendencies of country without going to the pop or definitely not to the bro country's extent either. Whew. But but well enough to where even indie alt country people can get into this, and your tip basic outlaws of country. So again, Stapleton knocks it out of the park, and on about almost everything he does, unless certain other artists just know how to screw things up so much that not even Stapleton could save it. I don't even mention what that is. But anyways, yes, high recommendation for sure. And if you want something better out of country, I mean, Stapleton knows what he's doing, and definitely one of the few artists out there that get played on airplay on mainstream stations that don't make me roll my fucking eyes and just make me go about time, something like that. Daniel Tompkins, Ruins. Yeah. So, God, I like this dude's voice. Mostly his claims. His growls are pretty good. I've enjoyed what he's done with his time in Tesseract, more specifically as Polaris, his body of work he's done when he was with Sky Harbor prior to Polaris, like in between that, during the Altered State time frame, which I understand when it comes to Tesseract, it's between Polaris and Altered State, but usually it just depends on which album you go to first with them, and for me it was Polaris, and it just hit in all the right ways. And this album is kind of the closest I've gotten from Tesseract, from anything Tompkins has done since, honestly. Not only that, but dude, oh man. Just the start of this record, getting freaking Pelini to do your solos, getting even getting Matt freaking Heafy. I mean, that's why I'm wearing the Trivium shirt. I mean, I already talked about the album. If you want to see that, check that out. Well, the Trivium album came out earlier this year, which is still going to make the list, by the way. Just clearing that up. Despite the issue production-wise with the snares, even though the way the drums are done on the record, regardless of that, are still played technique-wise perfectly with that. But that's not here nor there. But whatever he does drums here, Tompkins is fine. I love the gift, and it was quite a gift that I never thought I needed, especially when it comes to the nice moments of dual cleans and screams between Heafy and Tompkins. It was truly a gift in and of itself. And I appreciate that, and I do think that this just recently came out, like, not even too long ago. And a lot of people who had already chosen to make their lists in 2020 and not having given whatever comes out in December an even second thought except to put it out on 2021, when really it deserves to get a spot in 2020, and hopefully people going into 2021 will give this thing a shot. And if Tompkins even can tour or do anything at all with it, I'd like to see what he'd do. So, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's, given I've only gotten a chance to listen to it once, but even for the once listen I've had, I got enough out of it that was close enough for me with Polaris, and definitely made up for certain aspects of Sonder I didn't fully get out of, aside from Keenan. Whatever this one song that I forget had these cleans that were just as good as the stuff off of Polaris, but that's about it. About it with that. Still high recommend. Check that out. Check it out. Don't sleep on this thing, even though most people will be because of how late in the year this album has come out. So, even though I think it technically counts as an EP, so I've yet to check out Castle, so apologize. And Also, but anyways, Corey Taylor, CMFT. It's a good solo album. I know a lot of people are crapping on the CMFT Must Be Stopped. Is it great? No. It wasn't a great choice. That's why I understand Black Eyes Blue being the one and getting the success it deserves. Luckily, he was smart and had that single as a follow up thing. As an actual song, it's not that great. It's really the music video that does anything with all the cameos of people involved that he was able to get involved with it. And of course, your album, Corey Mother Effing Taylor, just in a very, very obviously PC fucking way that you had to. And for the most part, there was a lot of things that happened on this record that were already hinted at in the last Stone Sour record. Because technically, that's what this is. It's essentially him continuing Stone Sour, but in a way that goes directionally. If he had continued it the way he did here, especially if we're talking about CMFT Must Be Stopped, it makes sense that he's doing it in his solo record as opposed to it being on Stone Sour, even though technically his backing band may as well be Stone Sour, members of Stone Sour, minus like Jim Root, or at least the members that have been involved since the last outing. So it just makes sense, and I think the only way Stone Sour will possibly reunite is if Jim Root comes back to it. It's the only thing about it that would make it work. But for now, I'm fine with him going solo. The last two tracks despite the name of the track, it was honestly not a bad crossover thrashy type of thing, even though another artist did the kind of way of crossover thrash in as goofy of a way as that track was. I know an artist that did that all the way through that does a better job of that, and being that artist is sort of an influence to Corey and Slipknot yet alone, I don't think he'd blame me for saying that with that particular band. We're definitely going to get to that today with this catch up here. But, well, by the way, this is a swim. I forgot to say that earlier. I apologize. But, so what I miss. And that's what this is. So, and yes, as far as this album, it's mostly that, but definitely a lot more countryish tendencies. Has some other elements in it, but for the most part, up until maybe the final two tracks, it does pretty good. And I think if that's the direction he's still going with it, I don't mind the ideas that he was trying to do with the CMFT Must Be Stopped, but I could have done it better, man. And actually utilized your guest features you at least had in the video in a way that actually could have benefited the actual track as opposed to the choices of guests you did. It just doesn't work. And we know you can rap better than this, Corey. But I'd say it's not. Everyone wants to shit on this thing. It's not. Don't bother. It's pretty much, like I said, it's just pretty much Stone Sour. It's fine. Just minus the obvious CMFT Must Be Stopped. Everything else is a pretty good recommendation to listen to and worth actually going back to check out as an album as a whole. So Corey at least gave us something more than just whatever that CMFT Must Be Stopped was. But anyways, it's fine. Yeah. The Fallen Crimson by Envy. Out of a sheer recommendation from Crash Thompson, not realizing before going into it that apparently you got to deal with a language barrier. They're a Japanese-based band, and their music lyrically it's all in Japanese, so it's more so the music's gonna have to just do you in. And for a band that essentially combines post-rock, post-punk, post-hardcore, maybe post-metal, but I get like Death Heaven vibes from this dude. So I'd say if you want like some Japanese sort of like, especially if you did like the last Death Heaven record, it's definitely worth checking out. If you can get past the language barrier. I Let It In and It Took Everything by Loathe. If this album gets a lot of hype, do I think it's kind of overhyped? Little bit. I mean, it didn't. The moments it had where it did go Deftones, it did really well. Even though Vane actually had a song that honestly took one of the better known tracks that's off of here. That's a super Deftones on the soft side, and did a way better job than this band. Even though I would give Tompkins and the synth stuff on that one more credit, and not to mention Deftones already released an album that made up for a lot of the other things, and this is kind of progressive metalcore still, the gentler kind of thing. And their last, I actually checked out their earlier album. It is kind of by the numbers. Their recent one, this one having more Deftones elements and all that, embracing that sort of more metallic shoegazy side, definitely, and or at least dream poppy alt metal, definitely works and benefits for them and shows potential that this band at least luckily didn't release a sophomore slump, despite the way they end this album, which leaves a lot to be desired and does hurt its chances of replay value. But I do think they do have something here and they have more potential going forward. So it's Love's definitely something worth checking out. You know, give it a listen. Lamb of God, self-titled. Well, compared to Seven, Stromendrain, I mean, it's fine. The moment I saw the feature list, and given what I heard, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. All I needed to really do is if the drummer that's replacing what's his face is even better. Because I'm saying that because I'm blanking for some strange reason because it's been a while since I've listened to this thing. But even though Jim Johnson feature's good, okay, the dude from Testament's feature is pretty good too. Definitely damn good. That's why it was single. Uh, but yeah, but it's a fun record, and what they have to say, it's typical of Lamb of God, I guess. But you know, their last record was creatively had a lot more going on for it, and I was so grateful that that was my first experience with Lamb of God. To where I can understand people saying this is underwhelming, but at least, but the fact that they haven't made an album since Sacrament that's as bad as that, or at least as not so consequentially worth listening to as a whole. I mean, this record's clearly better than as long as they made an album that was, you know, not as Sacrament. I think they'll be fine, and it seems that is the case. And the drums are. It doesn't feel like what. Why am I forgetting the drummer's name? I apologize. I wish I would have viewed this damn thing when it was relevant. While I had it fresh in my mind. But anyways, regardless, Lamb of God still kick-ass band. Even for literally having been over 2 decades at this point of being around, still finding ways to be that to be the punk band that happens to just be playing metal music. You know, that level of good hardcore. I mean, it's fine, it's solid, it's still worth checking out, even if it's not the highest of recommendations compared to Strum and compared to what I gave Strum and Drain. Since I started started making these videos on this channel, so I had to make my indebted for that. So still somewhat worth your time, just not as much as maybe there's other albums. Protest the Hero Pamplist. It's another Protest the Hero record, apparently. Even though that's technically my first listen. And for a band that essentially combines melodic metalcore, progressive metal, thrash, and post-hardcore, yeah. And while being somewhat timely with its political messages it does have, but not nearly... I mean, for me, Soliloquy and... the track before that those were pretty good. There's some good hooks in here that need be. The guitar work is awesome. I mean, it's a good prog record. I mean, speaking of that, Virus by Haken. A good follow-up to Vector. In fact, I like it better than Vector, and I will still probably like it better than whatever that other weird 80s thing they did prior to Vector. I do think this is a better follow up. Their use of synth stuff and even their times they get a little Nintendo core, which is always fun. Do do do. Before assaulting you with do 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 do. Anyways, it's definitely a better album for sure. Just even though I went back into this guy having decided to go back at post having listened to Vector years ago. I Visions is still their best to me. So, but it's still fun to listen to. You know, Taken's still one of the few bands killing it. I think some of the stuff but having members work with some of the guys in Between the Buried and Me and stuff definitely rubbed off on them a little bit with these past couple releases. And it has something to do more with the Mountain in the sense that this is the follow up to the whole Cockroach King origin story that Vector had, and this one does, and it does at least give you musically a much better record, and it's definitely not as unfortunately short as last one. So just I mean, it's what you expect out of a lengthy prog record. So, but in a good kind of way instead of a bad. So worth checking out in that regard. No Dream by Jeff Rosenstock. Never properly had a chance to finish this, to sit with this as much, but I already know from the first listen, it's damn good if you like your more skate punky type stuff. I get if some people are like whatever with his music, but I liked this. I wouldn't say necessarily to have this be your first listen of Jeff Rosenstock. Regardless, what is said here, I already got a lot more out of another album I already reviewed earlier in the year that is still going to be hard to top. Hint, hint. And yeah. Yeah, Spanish Love Song's still got this thing beat. Don't know what to tell you about that. But it's a better Jeff Rosenstock record than what I heard the last album was, so take that with a grain of salt, or just take it as best you can for what it's worth. Omens by Elder. Why'd you go the Rush way in the worst possible way? Hell, speaking of Haken, they did better about it, or at least tried in places. The fuck was this, man? The last album was my number one of that year. I picked that over Brand New. And now all you made me do is regret doing that. Or at least listening to this. I mean, I don't mind some of the aspects of production. I just think you could have done something else with it and done something more, or at least added a little more grit to it to where it would have still worked in a way that would have maybe not as lo-fi in production. Sure, it's a little bit more high fidelity in production, which I like that aspect of it in terms of its polish, but I would still like to have had a little bit of that similar kind of gritty element that the last record had. And at least one track, the single of this record, was the closest we got. I couldn't listen to this album more than once. After the first time, I was like, I had to go back and listen to Reflection Floating World just to see if I was wrong about that record. I'm not. That record still kicks ass. That's why I don't understand why this doesn't. And why the dude that gave me the recommendation wound up putting this as nearly as high. Like, why? No. I mean, I want to praise him for being bold about it, but go back to the drawing board, guys. This just doesn't cut it, man. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. You let me down, and in a year where I didn't need you to do that. Because I had higher expectations for this, and I went in cold, and I got fucked. You're better than this, Elder. You're better than this. Show it next time. Show it next time. Fucking hell. Sex, Death, and the Infinite Void by Creeper. I mean, luckily, I did wind up listening to the first album eventually. I missed that out on the train when it came out that year, but I did get a chance to listen to it just out of curiosity and preparation because I did hear Creeper get was sort of some comparison towards the recent Puppy album. So I had to check them out, and then I heard that this was completely different, and I'm like, okay, this ain't a sophomore slump necessarily, but it's gonna be treated like it, and sadly, and I don't think people are gonna. And if anything, this album may just be lucky enough to have cult status as one of those possibly forgotten gems that have come out of 2020. Even if it does it, and for being bold enough to and still being musically solid and good as a listen, but yet doesn't pack the level of punch their last record did. Even when in songwriting, though I do appreciate the one chick getting in the band that's finally getting some more to do, and it does work and it's fine. It's definitely very more rockabilly oriented in comparison, or at least the moments they had that they teased in that record they do show here, but they do so much more expansively. It is definitely way more. What am I? What am I? Who am I? Besides "I Love It," who else is it? Chris Haynes, I think. But anyways, in terms of its rockabilly style, it's very gothic punkabilly. It's still worth listening to, but I wouldn't say I recommend it as high. But they're two different entities of this band, though. This is a different entity. The real question is what the band going to do now? Are they going to once again retool themselves, or are they going to like do something to where they find a weird combination between the last two albums for that? I don't know. So, chances are they may wind up having to rest on the laurels of the first record and have spill in elements of this one. Hopefully, and if they do, hopefully it's still tastefully well done in a way that is at least somewhat better than this album, even if it doesn't wind up somehow being better than that. But hopefully they try to do, which I can settle for that, but still shake things up a little bit if you need to as well. If you have to, just don't wind up putting yourself in a corner or just turning it into something completely boring. Because this wasn't boring, but I wouldn't say it hit the way the last record did. So, but still worth checking out. Boston Manor. Wish I could remember the album title for some fucking reason. God dang it. I'm just frustrated. I don't know it. I remember the name because you think I'd have it on the thing telling me, but I don't, and I'm very upset because someone took some, in the best way industrially, some cues from Code Orange, and I like this thing for it. The Nine Inch Nails sort of industrial elements. There's some garbages in the band, Shirley Manson, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. And amongst some other 90s, form of 90s flavoring. Some Oasis, I guess, too, maybe, some Blur. There's perfect blending of industrial elements of 90s industrial, or the best aspects of 90s industrial grunge, and even some Britpop to post-Britpop. Not to the point of Radiohead necessarily, though. Spirit pop, but more bordering on whatever Blair was doing on Self-Titled. I was leery. I liked the last album from them, but I just couldn't get into them, and finally they won me over here. It took like maybe in the middle of the record to do it, and then subsequent spins after. But high recommendation. Continue down this path, boys. You continue down this path. Jason Isbell and the 400 unit reunion. This album was damn good too. Granted, it had to be my first exposure to him compared to like Stapleton, but yeah, it's good. It's a shame that he's pissed off apparently a lot of people in the industry to where he's not getting the Grammy nomination he probably does deserve at least. because this album, it's awesome, and heck, I think the last track slightly feels like something that you could almost use as a song for a father-daughter dance at a wedding. If you want a good tearjerker type thing, that track really does. What an interesting way to go out an album too. Um, in letting go, but in letting you go, but and plus the opening, it's hard not to the moment his voice comes on, Isabel's voice comes on that record. Though there was some that I couldn't place, but as long as you don't get the, I'm not even gonna say it because if I do, automatically I'm gonna get bitched at for it. But hear Dreamsicle the way I heard it, and you'd understand why I think his voice sounds like Herb, the perv. Yeah. It's about the only complaint I've got during that point, but yet it's not like bad done son terror. He's not son terribly, and it's not lispy as that or anything. It was just it had that moment in Dreamsicle. That's why. What a popsicle? It's like, I mean, that's there. I'm sorry, Isabel, to say that when it came to at least that track. Other than that, everything else is awesome, and there's some really cool stuff lyrically going on, especially when it comes to the be afraid and to be, and especially with be afraid, or but do it anyway. That, but it's solid. Check it out. Check it out anyways. Even though there's probably other things Isabel fans will tell you, but where's the recommendation to me? 10 Years Violent LIs. And it's another 10 Years record. It's fine. I like 10 Years. I mean, they've had better, but they've had worse. They're definitely one of the better post-grunge bands that are Tool-esque in nature, or at least going the APC diet tool route in their case. But I've always had fun with their stuff. They've never hated an album. But people who've never gotten into 10 Years may have a hard time having anything to give them reason to get into them. But I wish I had more to say. I do think their instrumentals are great, despite what most everyone else says. I like them a lot. I think this one definitely fits more closer to A Birth to Burial than what they were doing on the last record, which I find a positive to me, but it's not fully offering anything new unless you're really looking for it, trying to look for something in it, but they still offer something nice. So, to me, it's solid, but nothing too special. Panther by Pain of Salvation. Y'all know how I felt about In the Passing Light of Day. At the time I first listened to this, it was literally the day after the album's release, which unfortunately hours later, near the end of that day, would unfortunately be the death of Chadwick Boseman, the man who helped bring Black Panther to life and become a symbol of. That's what made this even more like weirdly ominous, having to listen to this thing following that day. It's that part of it, of what that experience was, has worn off. That being said, I'm having at least listened to their first 4 albums on top of having listened to the last record helps definitely prepare you for musically what this album does. I wouldn't say it lyrically hits the way I think they were able to on the last album, but there's a lot going on for it musically. It's definitely more synth heavy. They find this way of making this more mechanical type of thing to it, but also being sort of in a way more techno organic when bringing in acoustic elements and stuff. Especially on the second track of this record. I mean, Accelerator's great. And Daniel still's got some good pipes. That still keeps you going in this. I don't say the ending is Icon isn't as good as this last record with Passing Light of Day in terms of ending things. So Species, though. Woo! Woo! It's another good album from them, of the more grungier prog elements that they've done. Highly recommended. Even keeping in mind this album being released the day of Bosman's death. Ominously. Drum and Ages. Yes, 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 yes. It's up there. It's up there. Great stoner rock that has these elements of what you missed about bands like of the 2000s, that you missed about Audioslave, that you loved about Queens of the Stone Age, that you loved about even moments with some Mastodon moments in it. And then apparently there's comparisons to early Failure, and this was my first exposure, and I actually immediately went and checked out their other stuff. I understand why this album's shorter, given the production style of this being not too far different from their last record. Yeah, I understand they kept it short and sweet in the best possible way. Surprisingly, it's considered a full length, even though it technically should be an EP. But this, I don't care. This album is worth your time. If it's your first exposure, good on you. Even though you could probably do their first 2 records, but this go down this rabbit hole. Ages brings super and super group, because first time I've heard about anything involving unwritten law in a while too. But anyways, highest of recommendations. They end this album guns blazing, and the vocals on this, I can't remember the vocalist's name. I wish I could remember. Trust me, but fuck. Especially by Dream State. Oh, especially when they have those cheesy moments when they think you're about to pull you out, they pull you back in. And they scream when he just has those cathartic screams while the guitars are going. This is great modern band Great modern band you need to check out. Drummond, it's up there, dude. Just Crash's recommendation. Once again, it was like a puppy, the puppy debut album. The GOAT. It's similar to that feeling for me. It's up there. Wrath of the Easter Bunny by Mr. Bungle. They back, bitches. They back. And they decided to do an album pre the demos that essentially, basically you could tell this is a high school demo. This is old school Mr. Bungle in attitude. And now this is technically a new album, but not really. It's a demo that was repurposed, having Scott Ian and Dave Lombardo, which was originally going to be Igor Cavalera, apparently, according to an interview with Eric Andre, which I totally recommended watching that too, by the way. That was awesome. I'm not a fan of him doing the dreads thing, but, Patton's weird. I get it. It's fine. And he said, Patton's crazy. He goes off on this thing. And what an interesting, and of course a thrashy / proto-death kind of a record that's makes sense of having this been the foundation of that band. A high recommendation. There is a Trivium. It's done a better thrash album, but for a band going old school, bringing old school thrash in a tasteful way, while still being the core of what is Mr. Bungle, or at least the stripped down core of what it is, and hopefully maybe Dead Cross will probably go off of this basis, or they may just do something more Dead Cross-esque, even though that's more hardcore oriented in its crossover thrash stuff. But anyways, yes, Bungle's back. High recommendation. Maybe they might do something where they combine something like this in California. Who knows? Inlet by Hum. Well, this was an interesting surprise. I might have enjoyed it more if I had and the thing is, I was 2 weeks too late when I found out this album came out. I'm like, wait, what? They did? And apparently they were working on it last year. I didn't know anything on it. I wasn't expecting anything from them. This was a surprise. I'm glad they're back. But there's a lot that's happened from your own influence from bands like Deaf Heaven and Torch. And you had to do something more, or at least Talbot needed to bring something vocally to match the level of intensity that's going on here. Or at least, it's a shame no Pod-like thing. I know Pod is a lot on his voice, but come on, dude. I know there's a way I think you can bring it. Or at least something happened production-wise that wasn't hitting that way, but yet the band was on fire. The best song on here, that not even his vocals, his menace in his attitude of how he delivers these vocals. can stop the fact of how the most Black Sabbathy of songs and the darkest sounding song, or at least is surprising by hum standards. Maybe not lyrically, but sonically. I forgot the. I'm pissed. I forgot the name of it, but it's that. Every other song's pretty good too, and the intro's great too. But I still prefer their recent album of their classic sound was really their true perfection. And I think maybe if they do another album of this caliber, that they try to lean more closer to that while still maintaining what they're doing heavy as fuck here. And more so Talbot act like he give a shit when he sings instead of just coming off duller than usual, I guess. I mean, or at least he can act like he gives a shit, you know. Come off the way you did on those classic albums, not what you did here. Just do that, okay? Next time, please. Thanks for coming back. Very much appreciate it. Glad I could finally talk about Hum. It was very nice. Blood and Stone by Seven Dust. Don't know if I like this more than All I See Is War, but I like it. I like it. And plus that cover that cover's so good. That Soundgarden cover they did was, though vocally I understand not being able to go that route, but it's a good template for people who can't do Cornell's vocals to go off of. So credit to LJ, and I love the way the chorus is done between him and Clint Lowry. Oh, on the rest of the album, I mean, besides the pseudo title track of Blood from Soul, how the opening track is way to get it. Definitely has something different going on about it. I might like this better than All I See Is War, but I understand that people like that more. I wouldn't say it's what people loved about their early 90s stuff necessarily, or at least to the extent of something like that. In fact, I think Disease is probably the one song on that one record I'm thinking of. That's still kicks out. That fourth album they did, Seasons. Probably the one album I actually like to listen to in its entirety that I could think of without having any features. These past couple records have been the only other exception to the rule, it seems. And keep kicking ass, guys. The fact you're still able to do it. It's nice to see an older band like this find ways to do so. So especially if I think Elvis Biscuit is still producing for you, and given Alter Bridge, and Tremonti, yeah, I understand why you have him producing for you, because it's working. It's working. Keep it up, boys. Gargoyles self-titled debut. So this is basically a grungy revival sort of an album, alt metal-y type record. Very, very Alice in Chains, but like, you know, especially the dual vocal style, it's fine, but like in a weird, almost BT Bam vocal kind of way. Or at least that's what this sort of particular form of progressive alt metal kind of is. It's fine. I feel like it's for a debut album, even though it does consist of musicians that are very well known. It's solid. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, and the chain gang vocal style, if you didn't like it when it came to a lot of the Duvall era stuff, I'm not sure if you'll like it here, but it's still worth listening to, so, you know, thumbs up at the very least. Hopefully these guys can finally do better with it and perfect what they're doing, so it's pretty solid for what it is. Alpha Wolf, A Quiet Place to Hide. A Quiet Place to Die. Yeah, this recommended by someone in the Schmodown community who is also a metalhead and hopefully a fellow random rocker. Yeah. I finally did check them out, dude. It's fine. I guess they're kind of deathcore. The third track was pretty wow. I think it's third track, because especially in how you handle a suicide, or at least a certain kind of way. It's But the final track is pretty good too. I did like clearly there's one track that's obviously meant to be more for radio ready stuff, but but it's fine. I like it too. Not a bad exposure to this band though. Code Orange spoiled me, dude. Can you blame me? I mean, it's good. It's good for what, or at least solid for what it is. But I might be looking out for them now. So thanks, Maddie. Thank you, Maddie Gunner, for the recommendation. A Ghost Inside by A Ghost Inside. Alright, guys. Yeah. This is not bad for just, basic metalcore having been produced by, Andrew McMahon, or McKeon, or Andrew McKinnon, or whatever from... somehow he's able to produce all these good bands that sound like ADTR on the heavier side, and that they come off better, than what's been happening with ADTR lately. Ah, Jesus. Even though I like, and I will defend this track in Resentment. It's just a shame their softer side is starting to be a little collar pulling with ADTR, but that's not the case here. It's sort of basic in that regard, but it still works. It still slaps. It's still solid. It's good. Especially if you liked Wages War. If you like them, or was it just Wage War? But anyways, but if you liked them, or at least, their first couple releases, this record's pretty good, especially given the stories of what has happened leading up to this record. I'd say it works pretty good in that regard. It's a solid release, so, yeah. Smashing Pumpkins, Crier. An addition of extra female vocals, going a synth pop direction. Second record we've seen since